There are three types of plates. The first one we will look at is a convergent plate. With a convergent plate, we have the plates moving in towards each other. So this arrow is actually showing you how the plates are moving. Okay. Now the blocks that I'm about to draw, these will be representation of the cross. Remember, we have the oceanic cross and the continental cross. That look a little bit crooked. Let me just clean this out and draw it again. We have the oceanic cross and the continental cross. But what I want us to look at first, what happens when we have two continental plates colliding or two continental plates converging? So if let's use C to represent continental. So C, two continental plates we're talking about. So the two continental plates, they are colliding. Then we will have the formation of mountains. So let's just put this in quickly before we forget. The two continental plates colliding, we have mountains. So MT will stand for mountain. So we have mountains being formed. What is actually happening here is these two plates are being pushed together and they are under stress. So because of the pushing and the stress, the plates will fold upwards. All right, so the plates will fold upwards and then you have your little, well, not little because some of our highest mountains have been formed here. Okay, so you have your four mountains. Next, let's see what happens when we have continental and oceanic. So let's divide so we won't get mixed up. Let's use another color as well. So we're going to use red. So C stands for continental, O oceanic. What happens here? Where there's a continental and an oceanic plate converging, the more dense plate, which will be the oceanic plate, will subduct or will go under. All right. So can you tell me which one of these plates would be the oceanic plate and which one would be the continental? Okay, good guess. This is the continental and this one is the oceanic. All right, so the oceanic plate is the denser one. So what happens here when this oceanic plate gets into the mantle, it will melt and be reabsorbed into the mantle. Then plumes of magma will rise to the surface and you'll have volcanoes being formed. So let's see if we can put in something that looks like a volcano. Don't worry. Just now I'm going to perfect these skills in drawing on the computer. All right, so these are little representation of the volcanoes. So so let's put in this before we forget as well. A continental and an oceanic plate. we'll have subduction. Do we need to write the whole word? Yeah, I'm moving slow. Be a little patient with me. So subduction. Continental and oceanic will give you subduction. All right, and remember we said subduction is where you have the more dense plate, which is the oceanic plate, going beneath the continental plate. All right, and again, the oceanic crust will dip into the mantle and it will be melted. Then we will have plume of magma that will rise towards the surface. And then you see things like volcano. We need to look at what happens when we have two oceanic. So we looked at what happened when we have continental and a continental, and we look at what happens when we have continental and oceanic. So now we will look at what happens when we have two oceanic plates. So let's use the color blue. Blue represent water. So we have oceanic, O's for oceanic crust and O's for oceanic crust. So what happens here? Now when we have the two oceanic crusts, of course one of them will be older and the other one will be younger. The older crust will end up subducting. So the older crust is actually more dense. I wonder why. So the older crust is more dense. So instead of volcanoes on island, there will be volcanic island arch in the middle of the oceans. And if they do rise up above the surface, they will be volcanic islands. So what we need to take away from this, where we have two oceanic plates or two oceanic crusts, we'll have volcanic islands. For example, in the Eastern Caribbean. Now, if you need a more vivid picture or pictures of what actually happens and additional reading, feel free to comment or send me an email and this will be provided. Or if you need me to make another video showing that, more images, just let me know. Remember, these lessons that I'm creating or that I'm trying to create is to make the understanding of plate tectonic very, very simple. I want you to get it. All right. All right, so let's quickly recap what happens at the convergent plate margin. We have two plates colliding, okay? Or if you want to say the plates are converging, so you have the two plates moving towards each other, and this is what this arrow is actually showing you. All right, so the arrow is indicating how the plates are moving. So they are moving towards each other, which means they are colliding. Where we have a continental and a continental plate, we'll have mountains being formed. Some of our highest mountains, they're being formed at the convergent plate margin. Where we have a continental and an oceanic, subduction will take place. Subduction, at the subduction zone, we have the denser plate, which is the oceanic plate, going beneath the continental plate. and it will eventually melt and then be reabsorbed into the mantle. After this happens, plumes of magma will rise to the surface, forming volcanoes. Then we have two oceanic crusts. So when these two oceanic crusts collide, we have volcanic islands being formed. Now, when these two oceanic crusts collide, the denser crust, which will be the older oceanic crust, will subduct, all right, or will go beneath the younger one. The younger one is lighter, and we have volcanic islands being formed. At the divergent plate margin, the plates are moving away from each other. They are moving apart. The arrows are indicating the direction of the plate movements. These little boxes or rectangle, these are representation of the plates. The divergence of plate occurs under or beneath the ocean. Just to remember that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this color to put in a few waves. Now, these blue waves represent water. As the plates continue to move, remember this movement is a very slow movement. Molten material will start to rise, and these molten material will fill the space between the two plates. As long as molten material get in contact with water, as soon as it reaches the water, it will cool and form new igneous rocks. As it continues to rise, filling the space, sometimes you'll have volcanic eruption and you'll have a ridge being formed. So this is what your ridge might look like. Now it doesn't stop here. So this process will continue and the ridge will end up getting wider and taller until it eventually stretches across both boundaries meeting on the ocean floor. And one such or one best known feature of ridge of a ridge is a mid-Atlantic ridge, okay? So basically what you need to remember is how these plates are moving. So these two arrows indicate the movement of the plates. So the plates, they are being pulled apart, and remember we said that this movement is slow and it happens beneath the ocean. As the plates are being pulled apart, molten material will rise, filling the space that is created between the two plates. All right. Sometimes we can have new igneous rocks being formed, and in cases where the rising of the material is very fast, you can have volcanic eruption. Then you also have a ridge being formed. All right. So that's what you need to know thus far about diverging. At the transform plate margin, the plates are moving past each other. Let's try to demonstrate what we are talking about. We're going to put in the arrows to indicate how they are moving. Remember, the arrows show the direction the plates are moving, and those are our little representation of the plate. Now, the transform plate margin is sometimes called conservative because there is no continent created or destroyed. The main thing to know here is that we will have earthquakes. Earthquakes happen at all plate margin, but the most noticeable one happens at the transform plate margin. And I'm pretty sure you guys have heard of the San Andreas Faults in California. Now, just to wrap up, what you need to know is that we have three plate margins, or if you want to say, refer to them as plate boundaries. We have the converging, which is also called the destructive, since we have subduction happening. We also have the diverging, which is called the constructive because there is a formation of new rocks which become part of the crust. And then we have the transform, which is also known as a conservative because there is no continent created or destroyed.